Welcome everyone and thank you for joining for our What's New in Koha 2411 and 2405 highlights session. So I've put in the public chat of Big Blue Button, which is our web conferencing tool, the link to the slides that I'll be talking through today. We'll also be sending them out after the session along with other resources that we talk about today. And so this session is going to work in that I'm going to go through quite quickly through what the enhancements we're going to be talking about, because there's a lot to get through. And then we can have questions at the end, and you'll also have more time to look at the resources after this to learn more, dig deeper into what the different enhancements are. But this is kind of a high-level overview of all the different enhancements in 2411 and 2405 that we're excited about. And hopefully everyone can see I'm sharing my slides. If you can't see that, you might need to click on presentation, which is a blue button at the bottom right-hand corner, in order to see the slides that I'm sharing. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about how Koha releases work, what happens when you do a major upgrade, and why do we do major upgrades. The enhancements and new features we're excited about in 2411 and 2405, and how you and anyone around the world can contribute to Koha, and then a chance for questions and answers at the end. So let's start off with how do Koha releases work? Well, Koha is an open source library management system, and it's built based on a community of developers, librarians, and volunteers all around the world that contribute code to the Koha project. And every 6 months, the Koha community releases a big update, a big package of changes, which includes things like the important bug and security fixes, as well as exciting new features and enhancements. So today we're talking about 2411. That's a major release, a major upgrade, and that was released just a few weeks ago at the end of November. The numbers of the version denote when it was released. So 2411 means that it was released in November 2024. So it's a major release. Similarly, 2405 was released in May of 2024, and that also is a major release. But you've seen with Koha, we have something called minor releases or minor point upgrades. These are monthly small packages of changes to existing Koha versions, and the point of them is to push out important security and bug fixes to Koha libraries already. So the major release has fixes, but also big changes, while the minor release has just fixes, essentially. So what to expect when your Koha instance has a major upgrade? So those upgrades containing the big changes. So for Catalyst hosted Koha libraries, we try to do one major upgrade every year. While we do the upgrade, while we install it on your Koha server, Koha is in something called maintenance mode, which means it's not usable while we're installing the upgrade, which is why we schedule it with you ahead of time. After the upgrade happens, Koha will generally look much the same, although you might see some layout changes. The reason for this, and this is really important to note with major Koha upgrades, is the Koha community has a principle of least surprises, meaning most new features or big changes come turned off by default. So in order to actually use many of the new features that I'll be talking about today, you have to explicitly enable them after you upgrade. So the Koha community tries to keep as many things as possible, functionality and display and behavior-wise the same with major upgrades. And if you want these exciting new enhancements, then you have to actually go and enable it in order to get it. But why do we want to do, or why would a library want to do a major Koha upgrade? Well, one reason, of course, is to be able to get access to turn on these exciting new features and enhancements. But the majors are crucial also for another reason, to get security fixes, efficiency fixes, and accessibility fixes. So, as I mentioned, these major upgrades are fixes to existing functionality, as well as new code, new changes, new functionality. Another reason why it's really important that libraries major upgraded on a regular basis, like once a year, is that Koha version, in this case we're talking about 2405 and 2411, are maintained by the Koha community for up to 2 years. After 2 years has elapsed, the Koha community won't keep pushing out the important bug and security fixes in those monthly minor point releases, meaning by major upgrading, you're always on a supported version of Koha, which is secure. It's getting important security fixes every month, and you can rest assured that your library users are on a stable and secure version of Koha. So it's really important to keep the major upgrades happening every year so that you're always on a supported Koha version. So we're going to talk about, for the new features in 2411, if you'd like to have a play around with them after this session, the Catalyst demo site, which we've got the OPAC URL and the staff client URL with the logins, is running 2411. We upgraded it last week, and it's available for you to have a play around with any of the new features we talk about. Don't worry about breaking the site. It's refreshed every night, so anything you do will be gone by the next morning. So 2411 had 10 new features, 184 enhancements, and 647 bug and security fixes. So quite a few things there. And we are going to talk about all the different changes and enhancements on the slide here. We do have a link to a blog post that I wrote talking in more detail about these enhancements, and also there's a link at the top here to the Koha community release notes, and they list all the changes in 2411, not just the ones that were picked out, but everything. So feel free to have a look at that as well. And we're also going to talk about these enhancements as well. So let's get into it. Okay, so in 2411, you can automate creating baskets and orders within Koha. So if your library uploads MARC files to Koha, so a lot of libraries use the stage MARC import to, if they have a MARC file and they want to import that into Koha. If your library does that and uploads MARC files, then what you can do is actually tell Koha to automatically create a basket and order lines within that basket within the acquisition module of Koha. The setup for this enhancement is, again, one of those new features that you have to explicitly enable. It doesn't happen by default when you upgrade. It is something that librarians can configure mostly themselves. There is one piece of it that you need a Koha support vendor like us at Catalyst to do a technical task on your server to schedule what's called a cron job, which is an automated script, because that needs to be running in the background every day for this feature to work. So mostly librarian configurable, but you will need some technical help from a Koha support vendor. So with this enhancement, this system preference is what I'm talking about, in that in order to use this enhancement, you have to enable the MARC ordering automation system preference. By default, it's disabled. You want to enable that. Once you've done that, you need to enable the MARC fields. You need to define some mappings and some system preferences. So we've got two system preferences here, mark fields to order and mark item fields to order. And using these, what you're going to need to do is say a field, so for example, price, and then we're going to have to say the mark field and subfield to map to that. So basically what we're doing with these system preference mappings is we're saying we're uploading a MARC file to Koha. Whatever data is stored in a particular MARC subfield, map that to a order field within Koha. So that order field might be price or quantity or budget name or things like that. So we need to tell Koha, look at these MARC fields and use these MARC fields to create an order. And Koha does help with this, so it's hard to see in the screenshot, but at the bottom of both of these system preferences, there is an example set of mappings that you could copy and paste with in order to put some example mappings in and then try and create an order and see how that looks, and then you can tweak them. So you don't have to dream it out of thin air. There is some examples there. So once you have defined those mappings, we need to go to a new page within the Koha staff client, which is MARC order accounts, and it lives within the administration module. So this is what the form looks like. We add a new account here, and some things, the important things that we have to add an account are we need to select a vendor. So you need to have a vendor set up in your acquisitions module and budgets and funds set up there, because we're telling Koha, use this vendor and fund in order to create an acquisition basket and order. And also we need to define a folder on the Koha server that Koha should look for your uploaded MARC files in order to process them and make the acquisition basket in order. So we've put in here what this file path will usually be. Where we've got lesser than, instance name greater than, that might be something that you also need to check with your Koha support vendor if you don't know what your Koha's instance name is on the server. It's a server technical setting. And you'll also want to, one of the options while creating this account is check for embedded item record data. You want to set that to yes, because you want to be able to correctly count up how many item records should be added to the acquisition basket. Next thing, we want to upload the MARC file. So if you've done any staging and importing of MARC records, you'll know in the Cataloguing module, there's a page called Stage Records for Import. On this page, all you need to do is upload the MARC file. So I've highlighted in yellow here, you just need to upload it. You don't need to stage it for import or do anything else. Just click Browse, choose the file, click Upload, make sure Upload Progress 100%, and then that's it. You don't have to do anything else. Then you have to, as I mentioned before, ask your Koha support vendor to schedule the cron job, the automated script, to run on a regular basis. This would probably be best to ask for it to be run once a day, usually out of hours, so first thing in the morning or overnight, just so that there's less load on your Koha server in the busy times of the day. Once the cron job is run, then you can navigate to your vendor in the acquisitions module, and you'll see a new basket. In this case, my vendor is, the vendor I have is called my vendor, and we've got highlighted in yellow the name of my basket. It's a long name and it's got MARC XM at the end because that was the name of the file I uploaded. And we can see it has an item count of 8, bibliographic record count of 2. So the MARC record that I've uploaded, Koha has automatically created a basket for it. If I click on that basket, I've got different orders. I've got 3 lots of orders within the basket, and things like if we look in the table here, different prices have values. That's all those numbers, so the prices, replacement price, quantity, etc. That's all coming from those mappings that you defined at the start of setting this up. So those mappings determine what populates these orders. So it's important to have a play and get that, have a play with that, get that right, and then you can have Koha automatically creating baskets and orders for you without you having to do all of that acquisition work manually. So that's really nice. So as I mentioned, I'm going to have to go through these quite quickly, but there'll be plenty of time for you to play around with this afterwards. So the next one we're going to talk about is the OAI harvester. So this is, up until 24.11, Koha has been able to be harvested by other systems, but Koha itself couldn't harvest content from other systems into Koha, but now it can. This is an enhancement that community's been wanting for a while. What you can basically do, this adds another new page to the Koha staff client called OAI repository. What this is basically saying is add if another system supports a standard, a format called OAI PMH, then Koha can harvest from that. So when we have repository name, that would be the name of your other system, and then endpoint would be the URL to the OAI PMH repository of the other system that you want to harvest from into Koha. So you'd probably need some guidance from whatever system you're trying to harvest from in order to fill out these particular settings. But once that's set up, then you would need to ask your Koha support vendor to again schedule another automated cron job called harvest OAI.pl. What this does is it checks the other system that you've defined in your OAI repository form, checks that every day. Is there any new content that's been added or deleted on the third-party system? And if it has, it harvests that content into Koha, so now it's searchable within Koha. If you want to be notified how these harvests happen, like basically be given a daily update on 10 new records have been added to Koha by these harvests, what you can do is put your email address into the OAI PMH harvest email report, and then you'll be sent a daily email, or however often the cron job runs, an email telling you how did the harvest go. So that's all very technical and abstract, but how can this be used how could this be useful for your library? Well, does your library have any repository systems that you store content on that you'd like to be made more available to your users? So for example, some libraries use something called DSpace, which is a repository system where they store photos, videos, PDF files, things like that. With this whole OAI harvester, you could fetch that data from DSpace into Koha, and then that DSpace content can be searchable within Koha. So your users can do a search within Koha and get both DSpace and Koha results. So it means that there's less search forms or less search interfaces for your users, and they can find more records because it's being harvested from multiple places into Koha. So that is a real-life example of how this could actually function. And I'm sure there's many more examples of where this could be useful. But again, you do need to make sure the repository system that you want to harvest from does support PMH, which is the technical standard that this whole feature relies upon. This is an enhancement that was sponsored by SCIS, and it's great to see some SCIS people here joining us. Thank you for joining. So with this enhancement, it's now possible with MARC modification templates to be able to copy and modify control fields. So a control field is a MARC field that's less than 10. So for example, the 001 MARC field. So up until this enhancement, it wasn't possible to batch modify these fields, batch modify or copy or change or move control fields, but now it is. So in this example here, we're creating a MARC modification template and we're moving every 001. So again, that's a control field. We're moving that value into a non-control field, 099A. If a condition is met, and the condition is if the 001 exists. So if it exists, copy it to a non-control field. And this is useful because sometimes when you're copying MARC content outside of Koha into Koha, the control field, the 001, contains an important identifier, and you want to store that somewhere where it's not going to be overwritten when librarians are cataloging or editing the record in the future. So if you copied it from the 001 control field to the 0099A, then you can basically preserve it somewhere. It's not likely to be overwritten, and it's going to be preserved for posterity and for future reference. So that's an example of where you could actually use this. So in 2311, the Koha community added a feature to Koha where library staff can, on behalf of library users, place a booking on an item. So you might be thinking, well, what's a booking and how does that differ from a reserve? They're quite similar. A booking is where a librarian sets aside an item for a library user between two dates in the future. So it might be the 25th of December until the 1st of January. You can place a booking and it's in the library system, and Koha will make sure that the item is back by the 25th of December for the library user that's placed the booking to get it. Whereas a reserve is not done in the future. So when you place a reserve, you're saying, I want it from any time from now onwards. So that's a difference. Bookings are for the future, between two dates in the future. A reserve is, I would like it from now onwards. Whenever it's available, I would like it. And you go into a queue. Whereas with a booking, one person can have it at a time. There's no queue. So in 2311, it was possible for librarians to make their items bookable. But in order to do this, the librarian would have to individually edit every single item and enable them to be bookable. This is a really slow process, as you can imagine. If you've got 10,000 items, you're going to have to edit 10,000 times. So not super helpful. And as we've noted here, some examples of why you might want to make an item bookable is if you've got a book club and they know that they want an item or a set of items to be set aside for them in a month, you could place a number of bookings on those items for the book club. Or if you have items that are needed for a course, or any time that you need to set aside an item for a period of time in the future. So with 2411, we've got a great time-saving enhancement where you can now batch set lots of items to be bookable by editing the item record. So rather than doing it on an item-by-item basis, you can navigate to the administration module, edit an item type, and you'll see that there's now a bookable checkbox. If you check that, then any item, any records in your catalogue that happen to have an item of that item type, so let's say this item type here is a music resource, and I've checked it, so I've made it bookable. Any bibliographic record, any title record that has a music item attached, you'll see the bookings link on the left-hand side and the staff client. And that will affect all the music items within the catalog. So that's a quick way that you can make lots of items bookable. That's not a global setting. You configure this at an item type level. Another good enhancement in 24.11 to bookings is that there's now a page in the staff client in the circulation module. So this screenshot is a screenshot of the circulation module's homepage. We've now got a page to view all of the bookings that are in the library and are ready to be set aside for someone to come and pick them up. So we've got this new page link called Bookings to Collect. And if you click on that, it's much the same as the Holds to Pull page, which is where you can view reserves that are ready to be set aside for pickup. So it's a good place for librarians to come to and see, here's a list of bookings that we need to put on the shelf aside for the users that have done those bookings to come and pick them up. And a third enhancement to bookings in 24.11 is to add turnaround periods around a booking. So what we mean by turnaround periods is a section of free time at the start of a booking and the end of a booking to let the library do some things. For example, transfer the item from one library branch to another, or maybe you want to schedule in repair and maintenance of the item between bookings. Until 24.11, you could have one booking immediately followed by another with no time in between for the library to do anything, and that got very messy. So now you can configure this both at a global level and at a item type specific level. So we'll see how this looks in a minute, but basically, if you want to set globally a turnaround period before and after your bookings, you can do this in the circulation and fine rules page in the administration module. And then there's a section on that page which is called default checkout, hold, and return policy. And there's two fields there, booking pre-processing in days and booking post-processing in days. And I've got both of those set to 3. So that means when a library staff user tries to place a booking, they can't do it 3 days before the booking date starts, and they can't do it 3 days afterwards, because we're saying we need 3 days before a booking and 3 days after a booking for the library to be able to do tasks and actions and repair and maintenance on that. We can also set, if you don't want to set a global rule, or you want some item types to differ from the default global rule, you can do that. We also have a section, also in the circulation and fine rules, called default holds bookings policies by item type. And here I'm saying for the books item type, I want 2 days of pre-processing, so a turnaround at the start of the booking of 2 days, and a turnaround at the end of the booking of 3 days for the books item type. So with Koha, it's great because things are you can control them either globally or you can control them more granularly for an item type or by other groupings. So it's possible to do really granular rules or global one rule fits all. So we can see in this screenshot, I'm placing a booking on a item which has the item type of books. So it's going to use the rules that I set in the previous slide. So again, the rules were pre-processing of 2 days before my booking starts, post 3 days after my booking ends. So now, when a librarian places a booking, we've got 2 days before the booking, so I'm just saying here I want the booking to be 27th of November, 1 day for booking this item. On the calendar, I have 2 days before the 27th, so the 25th and the 26th. They're my pre-processing days, so it's marked red. So booking those days out. And then after my booking, I have 3 days, it's 29th and 30th, also set aside because they're my post-processing days, my post-turnaround period that I've got, where we're saying give the library 3 days to be able to work on this item before it's then bookable by someone else. So it's great how Koha now makes that visible, so it's very easy to see 2 days before we can't do anything with this item, 3 days after we can't do this item, but then it's free to be booked again by someone else. This is another time-saving enhancement. So some of you might have played around when doing cataloging in Koha with the FastAdd framework. And it's essentially frameworks, bibliographic frameworks in Koha are just a template of MARC fields and subfields. Some of them have different fields to others. Some of them have lots of fields and others have very few fields. The FastAdd framework is designed to have very few MARC fields, only the essential ones, so that people that are learning cataloging or for non-cataloging staff that just need to add a record to the catalog really fast can come in, have a stripped down cataloging interface where they can just add the key MARC fields that are required, like title and author and that sort of thing, and then they can add a record quickly to the catalog. The trouble is, over the last few Koha versions, the FastAdd framework has been ballooning larger and larger with more and more fields and subfields, meaning it's not as useful as it was. So what the Koha community has done is stripped out lots of fields and subfields, and we've got a link here to this bug report. So these numbers up the top right are the bug reports. So this is where the enhancement was submitted and tested and added to Koha. And so we've got a link here saying which MARC fields and subfields have been stripped out in 24.11 so that it's now a slimmed down template that you can add records to Koha with. So this is a bit of a time saver for your catalogers or your library staff that need to add records to Koha really fast. So Catalog Concerns is a feature that's been in Koha for a while, and it enables library staff and OPAC users, so the public using your library, to report problems with catalog records. So this could be things like the version number is incorrect or the title is incorrect, any kind of discrepancies. And that's been a feature of Koha for some time. And in 24.05, the community added basic ticket management functionality to Koha for dealing with these catalog concerns. So librarians see at the bottom of the staff client, if you have catalog concerns enabled, that is, that some libraries have reported a concern, a problem with a record that a librarian needs to go in up. And in 24.11, this ticket management system that the community added gave Koha a web page where librarians could be allocated catalog concern tickets to fix up. Trouble was, unless the librarians kept navigating back to this web page regularly, they would miss if they'd been allocated a ticket. They weren't notified or they weren't told or messaged or anything like that to be told. A ticket has been allocated to you to work on. Now that has been fixed in 24.11, so there's a new Koha email notice called Ticket Assigned, and it has some default content in it. But the point about it is when a library staff member has been assigned a ticket, a catalogue concern, they receive this notice telling them you've been assigned a ticket and this is the ticket that you need to work on. So you can easily keep track of what your responsibilities are and what things you need to work on next. And as with all notices within Koha, this content can be edited and customized to your workflows. So we've got this screen that we can see in my screenshot is the Notices and Slips tool in the Koha Tools module, where you can change all of the content in the email that's sent out. So that's a nice way that librarians don't have to keep checking a web page a million times in order to see if they've been assigned tasks. This enhancement, the ability to reset notices. So lots of Koha libraries that have been using Koha for a while might have old customized notices, for example, the overdue notice. Sometimes the trouble with customized notices is when you upgrade, you're out on notice content changes. So the community might add an enhancement whereby you can add different types of content to your notice. But because you've got a customized notice, they're not being updated. So with this enhancement, you can actually reset old custom notices to the standard content that the other Koha libraries have. So what do we mean by this? I here am editing a notice and it's called overdue notice, and I have custom content in this. So my custom content says test Koha 2411 ODUE, so overdue notice content. And at the bottom left, I've now got view default. I've got a button there, view default. If I click on that, a pop-up loads, and this shows the standard content that overdue notices have out of the box in Koha. So this has got all the latest content, and we can see this content is very different to the custom content that I had, which was just one sentence. This has lots of different fields that will be substituted with actual useful data for your users. If I've decided, okay, I'd actually like to use some of this content, then I can click the copy to template yellow button, and then my overdue notice, that single sentence of custom content that I started with has been overwritten by what was in the pop-up. So now I've got standard content, which I can then go and tweak. But this is a way that you can update your old notices to get all of the great new features that have been added over the last however many Koha upgrades that you've had since you first tweaked your notice. So that can be really good. And the other good thing about this feature is you don't have to overwrite the content, and just click on that view default, and this pop-up shows you what the standard is. And then you can copy paste bits of this across. You don't have to completely overwrite, but it does show you what an alternative set of content for your overdue notice or other types of notices would look like. So that's really nice. This is a nice quick enhancement. So the Koha OPAC now has a cite link. So if you click on that, then a pop-up loads the citation for the title record in 4 different formats: APA, Chicago, Harvard, and MLA. So this is really good for your users if they are citing records in your catalog for, of course, academic purposes, but I'm sure there are other purposes where you'd want this information. So that is available for any libraries that use the Koha OPAC. This is a nice feature to make your Koha more user-friendly, really. So there's now a preferred name field when you are editing or adding patron records to Koha. So we can see here with a preferred name field, before we just have first name, surname, middle name. Now we've got this new field, preferred name. And so for someone like me, my first name is Alexander, but I prefer to be called Alex, so I can put Alex in, and then Koha will prioritize using that preferred name throughout all the different interfaces. So we can see here on the checkout page now, Alex is used rather than Alexander. If you don't have a preferred name set, then Koha will default to continue to use the first name, the full first name. This is a good security enhancement. So now, if a library staff member is having to set passwords for new patrons, you can actually force those new patrons to reset their password when they first log into Koha. This is another setting where we can set it globally. So there's a system preference called force password reset when set by staff, long name. We can set that to false, and we can, another thing that's really important with this feature is to enable the enable expired password reset system preference. That's required so that when your users try and log into the Koha OPAC, they get a link to reset their password themselves. Otherwise, they're going to have to, you're going to have lots of users asking your staff, library staff, to reset the password for them. With those system preferences set up, if someone has created my patron account manually, when I first log into the OPAC as a library user, I see this message. It's your first login, you need to reset your password, and I'm given a reset your password link. When I click on that, I can put in a new password and reset it, and then I can log in. If you don't want to set a global rule, or you want to set more granular rules for different types of patrons, different patron categories, you can do that. Again, Koha is really good for global settings and granular settings. So in the administration module, under member categories, you can edit a category, and there's a new drop-down called Force New Patron Password Reset, and you can either tell it to use the global setting that you've defined in your system preference. So in this case, I'm saying use whatever I've set in my system preference, in this case, force. So when users of this category try and log into Koha for the first time, they'll be forced to reset their password. You can also tell Koha for patrons of this category, don't force them, don't follow the global rule, do something different. So again, you have a huge amount of control over whether you want to do a global rule for everyone or different rules for different types of people. This is an enhancement sponsored by our partner library at Waitaki District Council, and this is the ability for library staff on their staff account within Koha to add a guarantee. So within Koha, guarantee is usually someone's child, and it's so that the adult can see the checkouts that the children have to make sure items are returned on time and whether their children have any overdues, things like that. Up until this point, library staff would have to have two accounts, one being their staff account and then another one being an adult account, because you could only add guarantees to an adult account. Waitaki District Council asked us to work on adding an enhancement. So now you can add guarantees, add child accounts to a staff patron, and then your library staff only need to worry about using and managing one account within Koha where they can do all of their work, but also on the same account see the checkouts from their children and keep an eye on that. So that's a nice little time saver. This enhancement is quite a technical one, but basically it's adding something called a REST API endpoint, which is just a bit of code within Koha that other systems can run to retrieve data from Koha. In this case, other systems can retrieve public lists from Koha. So in this case, we have a public list called Spring 2024. And if another system uses the URL API/v1/public/lists, they'll be able to get this content. And then they can display that. Another system could display that. So this other systems that might call a API endpoint in Koha would be things like discovery systems like ViewFind and other things like that, which might want to fetch a list of lists in Koha and display that. Or maybe your library website could fetch a list of public lists within Koha, and you could draw users into visiting Koha because you've listed on your website, here's a bunch of themed lists for the year that are in Koha, and then when someone clicks on them, they're redirected back to Koha. So it's a good way to showcase your catalog and draw users from your library website over to Koha. And a nice little quick feature here is there's now a shortened shareable link within the staff client for item searches. So if you do an item search within the Koha staff client, there's now a copy shareable link at the top of the table. Clicking on that, you can send that to someone, and instead of a really long URL that's quite unwieldy, you have a nice short link, and it's just a nice little user experience improvement. And that shareable link is now also displaying above other tables within the Koha staff client, not just item searches. So that is a quick rundown on your 2411 enhancements, and then we're going to jump into some of the highlights that we found in the 2405 release. So as with 2411, our slides have links to the blog post that we wrote highlighting our favorite changes, and then the release notes highlighting all the changes. And we're going to talk about these bullet pointed enhancements. So this enhancement is one that was sponsored by Auckland University of Technology, AUT, and it's great to see there, Matt. Thank you for joining. So this enhancement allows libraries to, for items which are circulated frequently or need a short circulation window, so things like hourly loans, if you have a high in demand item and you want to check it out, say you only want to check it out for 2 items because you've got a lot of users that need that item, then this enhancement adds a system preference, consider library hours in circulation. And what this enables you to do is tell Koha how should Koha handle the library opening hours when calculating when an item is due. So what do we mean by this? If a library closes at 5 p.m. and someone checks out an item at 4 p.m. and the item has a 2-hour circulation window, so the patron can have it for 2 hours. If Koha says the item is due at 6 p.m, that's not really very helpful because there's no one at the library now to check the item in because the library is closed. With this enhancement, with this system preference, you can tell Koha what to do as you're getting close to that closing time for the library. You can tell Koha how should it handle those library closing hours, and when should we say the item's due date will be. So we can say do not consider, one option from this system preference is do not consider the library's opening hours. In that case, we'll make the item due at 6 o'clock regardless of the fact that the library is closed then. We can shorten the loan period to when the library is closing. So that means if we've checked it out, normally it would be due at 6 p.m, but because the library closes at 5, we say that we Koha will set the due date to be 5 p.m. so the item is due back in time for the closing time. Alternatively, we can extend the loan period. So that's saying we'll extend it to the next time the library is open. So we'll say the item is now due at 9 a.m. the next day. So this is letting you quite intelligently tell Koha how to handle those tricky edge cases where someone checks out a high demand item quite close to the library's closing time. This enhancement is enabling library users to place multiple holds on different items. So up until this point, when a user in the OPAC or staff client tried to place a hold, they would have a checkbox, they would have a radio button every single item for a title record. In other words, they could place one hold, they could place a hold on one specific item at a time. That's fine, usually, but if you have items like periodicals, where there will be not all items attached to a title article, you might have a December edition, a January edition, a February edition, and someone wants the December, the January, and the February edition. They want to place a hold on all three. It wasn't very helpful. With this enhancement, it's adding a new system preference, display multi-item holds. When that's enabled, so this again is another feature where you have to actually explicitly enable it to use it. It's off by default. Once it's enabled, instead of radio buttons, you've now got checkboxes when you're placing reserves. So now I can place a reserve on this first item and the second and the third item. So I can place multiple item level reserves. Great, as I say, for your periodicals where you want the December edition and the February edition. You don't just want the December edition. So that's a nice use case for how you could use this. This enhancement is another one that SCIS sponsored, and it's a good little time saver. So if you do a search within the catalogue and you get only one result, instead of Koha loading the search result page with just a single result, which you then have to click on, Koha will automatically redirect you to that singular result. Again, this is another one that you have to, a new enhancement that you have to actually explicitly enable using the redirect to sole result system preference. But it's a simple change, but it does save the users a click. So it is a bit of a time saver. This enhancement is another one where you'll need some assistance from your Koha support vendor or someone that has access to your Koha server. What it does is it adds a new script to Koha, which you'll need your support vendor to configure a cron job, an automated script, to run at a regular interval on your Koha server. So our recommendation would be you'd ask your support vendor to set it up to run once a day. So again, either first thing in the morning before the library opens or overnight. What the script will do if your Koha support vendor schedules it to run for you is it will look through your authority records in your catalogue and it will remove duplicate authority records based on rules that you define. So the rules that you can define, these rules tell Koha which of the duplicates to remove. So you can tell Koha, keep the most recent of the duplicates. If you have 5 authorities and they're all duplicates, you can tell Koha, keep the most recent one, remove the other 4 older ones. That's one rule. Another rule, keep the duplicate, so keep the authority that's linked to the most number of bibliographic records. So this is the most used authority heading. Keep that, remove the others. Or, and this is more, the third rule is more specific to UniMARC. It's for UniMARC only Koha installations. Keep a duplicate if it has a PPN. But if you have a large Koha catalog with lots of authority records, of course, this could take a while for the script to run through all of those authorities looking for duplicates. If you're not interested in going through all your authorities looking for duplicates, you only want to check authority records added this year. Are there any duplicates that have been added this year? You can also do that with this script. If you ask your Koha support vendor to pass this rule while they schedule the cron job, you've got a rule here, a where rule. So we're saying where the date created, so the date created of the authority record. If that is after, in this case, we're saying the 31st of December 2023. With this rule added onto our cron job by the Koha support vendor, the script will only search for duplicates for authorities created in 2024. So it won't look back through the last 10 years of authorities for duplicates. It will only look for duplicates within authorities created this year. So that will, of course, mean the script will run faster because it's not going through as many authority records. So that's a good way to limit down the scope of the script. This is another good enhancement for displaying author information on your Koha OPAC. So I mentioned within 2411, there's a feature to add there's a cite link, and we can get a pop-up of 4 different citations for a bibliographic record in the OPAC. And that's useful, obviously, for academic libraries. This enhancement is useful for academic and likely other libraries because you're grouping together all the author information associated with a bibliographic record and making it clearly visible to your users. So here, using the OPAC author identifiers and information system preference, we're saying lump together these different MARC subfields in the OPAC when someone's viewing a bibliographic record. So how does this look in practice? Well, here we have a record, Persuasion by Jane Austen, and with preference checkboxes selected for that system preference, we now have a new tab called Author Information displaying on the OPAC. If we click on that, it's now bringing in and labeling all the different information about Jane Austen. So we've got field of activity, fiction, occupation, place of birth, place of death, and so on, all lumped together in one place. So that now, between 2405 and 2411, you'd be able to get a citation plus all the author information about a particular bibliographic record. This particular author display is really good also because it also displays for authority records in the OPAC. There's now an author information section at the bottom of this authority record, again pulling together all the data about the author into one place. This enhancement enables you to copy-paste the Koha patron permissions from one library staff member to another. So lots of libraries have got something called user provisioning, where Koha is automatically creating users for you in Koha, which is great, but that doesn't actually set any permissions. In order to, if you've got a new member of staff in the library team that's joined, you will need to manually give them permission so that they can log into the staff client. They're a bit onerous if you have lots of new people you're onboarding to the library team. and you need to set permissions for every person. Now you can speed that up by going to an existing library staff member and viewing the permissions they have. And then we've got two new options now. We've got copy settings and paste settings. If I copy settings on this Sam Hawkins permissions page, then I can go to other patron permission pages for my new people, and I can click paste settings, and everything of all the checkboxes, all the permissions will be copied over for me without me having to go for and individually check the correct checkboxes. If you click copy settings here for Sam Hawkins, come back to this page every time. So if I was adding, say, 10 new library staff members, I would click copy settings once for Sam Hawkins, and then I'd go to those 10 different pages and just paste, paste, paste. I don't have to return to Sam Hawkins again. It's kept held within my paste buffer. This is an enhancement to the Koha reports module. So now it's possible to use, well, for a while it's been possible to use what's called a runtime parameter, which is basically in your SQL reports. If you've looked at your SQL reports, you might have a bit of SQL that looks like this. And what this is doing is saying, give me a drop down of all my library branch names in my Koha instance. So we can see here, where is telling us this is going to be a condition. So I run the report. When I run the report, I'm prompted to select a value from a drop down. So we can see my screenshot here. I'm running this report, and my report is selecting items by their holding branch. When I run the report, I see this drop down. The drop down has a label, select the holding branch, which matches this bit of text to the left of a vertical pipe. The right of the vertical pipe, I'm telling Koha, populate my drop down with valid branch names in my Koha instance. One of those branch names is Centerville. That's why I have populated, that's why my drop down is populated starting with Centerville, but if I click on the drop down, it would list all of the branch names in my instance. This whole runtime parameter is really good because if you asked your users to type in holding branches rather than giving them a drop down, you're then at risk of having human error where someone mistypes Centerville and the report returns nothing. So giving drop downs rather than text inputs is great. It eliminates human error. But in 2405, the community added other enhancements to these runtime parameters. So now there's an option in the drop-down can have all as an option. So rather than, if I want to, for my report here, select items by holding branch, if I have 10 branches, I run this report 10 times, choosing a different drop-down option every single time. So that's going to take me a really long time to get my results, and then I'll have to collate everything together manually. What this enhancement does, when you add a runtime parameter now, you can choose include for all. And now, when I am running my report, the first default selected option in the drop-down is all. And so if I'm going to get select items for all holding branches. So I don't have to run it 10 times, I just run it once using that all option. But what about if you want to run it for run the report for 5 of your 10 branches? There's another great enhancement in 2405. There's now the option of allow multiple selections. Now my drop down, when I've got that selected, my drop down is no longer a drop down. It's a multi-select list. In this case, I want to select the items for 3 of my branches, Centerville, Fairview, and Franklin. I don't want the results for Fairfield. That's why that all option wouldn't be good, because I don't want all, I just want 3 of them. But with this runtime parameter now, with those 3 selected, I get all of the items for those 3 holding branches in one run of the report. That's a really good time saver. This enhancement enables us to tell Koha, send notices to multiple different email addresses. So quite a few people, or quite a few library users will have multiple email addresses, and they've likely got those set up in their Koha patron account. So they might have a primary email address and a secondary email address. You can configure Koha to send notices to both the primary and the secondary email address based on some global system preferences. So the system preferences that this enhancement adds are email field primary, which is this first system preference in the screenshot, and we're telling it use the patron's selected addresses. So that is telling Koha, look at the value of the second system preference. The second system preference is email field selection. And in here, it's a drop down, and we can choose, we want to send notices, all notices, to every patron, the patron's primary email and secondary email if they exist. Obviously, if a patron just has a primary email, then they'll just receive one notice. If they have a primary and a secondary email address set, then they'll receive 2 notices, one to their primary email, one to their secondary email. That is helpful in a situation where you aren't getting through to patrons, or they're missing library notifications because maybe they're not checking their primary email very much anymore, and they're checking their second email. So you can tell Koha, get the word out to your users by using all of the different email addresses that you have, that they have set up. Of course, you'd want to avoid spamming them too much with library notices and information. So that's a fine line, but it can be something that you play with, and maybe your library might just use the primary email and haven't set a secondary email, in which case you wouldn't want to use this. But it's that balance between getting the information out there and spamming the library too much. This enhancement is good for print notices. So what you can do is, thank you, Janie. What you can do is add custom styles, so things like font colors, margins, letterheads, logos, colors, all sorts of things like that to your print notices within Koha. And you can do that without really needing to know too much in the way of code, or so the coding language that we would use for this is called CSS, which is for adding style or theming or visual elements to a web page or a notice. So how does this work? Well, when you're editing a notice in the Notices and Slips tool, we have a format drop-down, and if we click on that, we have now got a text area. And let's say we want to add a font size rule. So I'm setting the font size to 60 pixels. It's going to be quite large font in this print notice. You need to, with CSS, define something called selector, which is basically the part of the page that you want to apply your theme rule to. So in this case, Koha actually helpfully suggests what selectors you might want. So we've got these 3 links up the top where you can insert selectors to apply styles. So let's say I want to set a font size just for headers within my print notice. If I click on headings, Koha will automatically load all the selectors for every heading in the notice. So that means you're not having to try or find out what those selectors are. Koha does it for you. Similarly, if you have a table, you might want to set a background color to that table. If you click Tables, Koha will load the selector for table, and then all you need to do is put in the rule. So in this case, my rule is just font size 60 pixels. So using these selector links up the top, Koha is doing most of the work for you. It's putting in the selectors. All you need to do is put in the rule for what you want to do to those parts of the notice. So that's really quite pretty user-friendly if you're unfamiliar with coding or CSS or theming, and it could be something that you can play around, play around with on your test site or our demo site. So that is the end of what's new in 2405, and I'm just going to briefly talk about how anyone can contribute to Koha, and then we can, if anyone has any questions, talk about those. So as I mentioned at the start of the session, Koha is an open source project, which means anyone around the world can contribute to it. You don't have to be nominated to contribute to it or anything like that. It's completely open. And if you don't know code, you can still contribute to Koha. So you can do that by sharing usage statistics from your Koha library with something called Heya. And Heya is an online database that the Koha community uses to see how Koha is being used. So what features are being used, what are some of the anonymized statistics from your library about how you're using Koha. This is useful to the community because they can see lots of libraries are using a particular feature, so they'll drive development effort towards that feature because it's widely used. So if you'd like to try and influence what new features or what parts of Koha get more development effort from the community, using Heya is a great way of doing that. It does anonymize all the statistics of how your library uses Koha, so you don't need to worry about privacy implications because everything's anonymized. Another thing you can do is share content with the community through something called ManaKB, which is another online database. In this situation, content would be things like SQL reports or serial numbering patterns. What you can do is share the SQL reports that your library has written with other libraries in the community, and then you can download things like SQL reports and numbering patterns that others in the community have created. So it's a great way to collaborate with other libraries. You do have to be careful with the SQL reports that they are valid for your Koha version. So it's always best to try it out in your Koha test site first. Because old SQL reports aren't necessarily dropped out, removed from ManaKB, so you might end up downloading an old invalid report. So always best to check these things on test first. Other things you can do if you want to contribute directly and you have some technical knowledge about coding, or you don't even need to know coding. A lot of people start contributing to Koha by things like writing terminology fixes where they might want to change some wording within Koha, so not code but just wording. You can write a patch and submit that to the Koha community. You can test patches that other people have written, or if you don't want to do either of those, you can sponsor a Koha vendor like us at Catalyst to write a bug fix or write a new enhancement, and then that will get sponsored. So if you sponsor that, that'll be tested by the Koha community and upstreamed, and then all the libraries around the world that use Koha can receive. Another good thing, KohaCon 2025 is a yearly conference of the Koha community that is being run in November here in Wellington, New Zealand. And we're looking forward to that very much. And that has lots of different talks, a huge variety of people, all about libraries, about how they use Koha, developers about features they're writing for Koha, all sorts of things like that. So it's great professional development and inspiration. Well, I just wanted to say thank you all very much for joining, and if you have any questions, let me know and I'll be very happy to assist.